Hello, and welcome to this Heroes of Blackreach campaign series. Today, we'll be playing scenario number 5, The Hunt. We return to the planet of Blackreach. The hive city Gospora has been saved, and the Orks are retreating. But the war boss has managed to escape. The hunt is on. In this scenario, the Ultramarines will be deploying from the left-hand side, initially starting off the battlefield and entering during the first game turn. The Orks will be deploying here, in the centre of the battle grid, in these 3 columns. These 2 lines of fortification are part of an Ork stronghold, and the Ultramarines' objectives lie within that stronghold. There are 3 objectives on the right-hand side of the board that the Ultramarines must reach. It's their goal to control 2 of those objectives before the end of turn 6, and the game will end as soon as this goal is fulfilled. If the goal is not achieved, it's a victory for the Orks. The battle will last 6 turns, and the Ultramarines have the initiative. Each player will draw 4 action cards and have a hand limit of 4 cards. Now we've seen the scenario, let's look at the armies. And this is the army for the Ultramarines. So we have to bring along Sergeant Elias's scout squad and Sergeant Voralanus' tactical squad. On top of that, there's 100 points to spend on extra units and upgrades. Let's start by looking at Sergeant Elias's scout squad in a little more detail. So Sergeant Elias brings with him 3 scouts. Now each scout has a single life, which means that if it takes a hit, then it's destroyed. But they have an inactive and an active side. So this side is the inactive side, and here I'm showing the active side. When the unit has the active side, it's concealed and can hide that little bit better from the enemy. Then, spending some of those 100 points, 20 points were spent on the scout sniper. The scout sniper also only has a single life, and he can hide like the rest of the scouts. And he also has this sniper symbol, which means he gets a special set of rules for when he's firing his sniper weapon. But it's relatively short range at only 4 squares. Next, spent 10 points on the camo cloak, so that gives 3 camo cloaks. Each one provides a +1 bonus for cover. So it means that the scouts can hide that little bit better in cover. Right, moving on to Sergeant Voralanus' tactical squad. We've seen Sergeant Voralanus a few times now, so you should be fairly familiar with him. So you've got Sergeant Voralanus, 2 units of tactical marines, and the plasma gun unit. I've spent 45 points on the Rhino, and as part of the expansion pack, I've also got the attack bike. So I spent 25 points on the attack bike. Now the attack bike is pretty good against vehicles, okay against infantry, but it's fast. It only has 1 life though, so it's a little bit fragile. But hopefully that can get raced behind the enemy lines and do some damage. So the idea of this army that I've put together is that the scouts can clear the way by sneaking up a little bit on the Orks. And then ideally the Rhino can come charging through and head towards the objectives to claim them for the Ultramarines. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 order stars. So that gives 4 order tokens for the Ultramarines for this battle. So here we have the army for the Orks. So welcome back to our friends the Green Raiders. But on top of that, we've got 200 points to spend on other units and upgrades. So let's have a look in more detail the composition of this army. So starting with the Green Raiders, that means we bring along 4 sluggers. And then for 35 points, bringing along the rocket launcher. So the rocket launcher should provide some extra anti-vehicle support for the Orks. Next, the Sluggers unit for 65, so that's 3 more Sluggers. So that's a total of 7 units of Sluggers. That's plenty of close combat assault for the Orks. And then finally, for 100 points, the Tank Busters. So the Tank Busters is 2 Tank Busters units and the boss. So the Tank Busters have a single life, and they also have an active and an inactive side. So on their active side, they have the ability to overwatch, which means that they can shoot when the enemy is moving. So that should be a very powerful ability for them to be able to shoot at things when the Ultramarines are moving them across the battle grid. So the Orks have 3 order tokens. They have 1, 2, 3 stars, giving them these 3 order tokens for the battle. This is what deployment looks like for the Orks. They didn't deploy first, but they were the first to deploy onto the battle grid. So there's units of Sluggers here, here, and here. The Tank Busters, choosing to be on their active side with Overwatch, are here in the barricades. The boss, 2 more units of Sluggers, hiding behind the barricades here. The rocket launcher, sitting in this crater. 2 more units of Sluggers here behind the wall. And the final Tank Buster unit, again with Overwatch configuration, sat in the barricade. Even though the Ultramarines have to deploy off the board, Sergeant Elias's Scout Squad have a special ability, which means that they can deploy 3 squares onto the battle grid, even though the rest of the army starts off the battle grid. So that's their special scout capability. So here we can see the deployment for the Ultramarines. So they've got all of their units, all of the scout units are in their concealed configuration, and they've all moved 3 squares into cover on this left-hand side. Okay, let's move into turn 1. At the end of the orders phase for turn 1, the Ultramarines place their order tokens first. They're given an order token to this unit, to the Rhino, and the Rhino contains Vorolanus' tactical squad. Also given an order to this unit and to the unit at the top. The Orks have given their orders to this Sluggers unit, and the rocket launcher. Bear in mind that the 2 Tank Buster units both have Overwatch, so if they spot movement from the Ultramarines, then they'll be able to fire even though they don't have an order token. Nearly at the end of turn 1 activation phase, story so far is that the 2 scout units sneaked up behind this rock formation and into these 2 positions here, hiding in the rocks. The Ultramarine Rhino came in and has also driven up, hidden from sight, hiding behind these rocks. The 3 Ork units had no line of sight, nothing to fire at, and so they haven't done anything this turn. Finally though, the Ultramarines have this unit to move. This is their 4th activation. So as it leaves this terrain element, then this unit here will have a clear line of sight across to be able to spot it. So this sniper unit is no longer concealed. But it continues its movement and moves into this square here. At which point the Tank Busters can use their Overwatch to fire at the scout sniper. So the Ork unit fires at the Ultramarine scouts. They have an extra +2 for the cover, plus their 5 gives them a total of 7. Orks, though, play go 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 for the +1, coupled with the +1 the tank busters have, means they need a 5 or a 6, and they rolled a 6. So that means that the scout sniper is eliminated. At the end of the supply phase for turn 1, so Sergeant Elias, that was here, has moved forward and into this crater. However, he was spotted as he made that move, and so he's now on his inactive side. This unit was able to move across here and into this terrain and remain concealed. And then the bike came on and moved across and is hiding behind this cover here. None of the Orks moved. Here we are at the end of turn 1. The Ultramarines have been creeping through the rocks, and they've had a casualty with the scout sniper. Very good shot by the tank buster squad. The Orks not really doing very much yet, just biding their time and waiting for the boys in blue to come across and get in range. Let's move into turn 2. Here we are at the start of turn 2, and the Orks have the initiative. So they have placed their 3 order markers in these locations. So that's 1 order to the sluggers unit, 1 order to the rocket launcher, another order to that sluggers unit. Next, the Ultramarines put down their 4 orders. So there's 1 for Sergeant Elias, 1 for the scout squad, 1 for the Rhino, and then 1 for this tactical unit inside the Rhino. So the first unit to activate for the Orks is this rocket launcher, realizing that it was able to see across to this attack bike, had line of sight. So fired the rocket launcher across, but unfortunately rolled a 2, which means the attack bike is uninjured, not damaged. The rocket flies by. Next, the Ultramarines activated their first activation, Sergeant Elias. Sergeant Elias firing across into the barricades at the tank busters, getting a really good roll, which means that that tank buster unit is destroyed. So the second activation, the Ork unit that was here has moved round in front of the barricades and taken up position in these boulders here, looking at these targets here. Next, Ultramarine unit that was here has moved forward, managed to remain concealed, and is now hiding inside this crater. Third activation for the Orks. The Ork that was here has moved and is now assaulting the unit that was concealed, so that forces that unit to be flipped over. So the scout unit is getting a bonus for being inside the crater. Other than that, it's pretty even in terms of the strength of those 2 units in assault. So the Ork player has played Get the Gits for the +3 bonus on the assault, giving them an advantage. So the Ultramarines countered that with Vengeful Fury, which levels it back again, and also added Just to Graze for the extra +1 in assault. So then it came down to the dice. This was the dice roll, and that 6 means that the Orks win that assault. So the Orks take that position, and the Ultramarines unit is removed. Third activation for the Ultramarines. The Rhino moves up. As soon as it comes around the side of these rocks, it's able to see the tank busters. So it does a fire on the move attack using suppressing fire. Also playing burst into action so that it doesn't get any penalties for firing on the move. So the Ultramarines rolled a 4, which means that the tank busters take a suppression marker. Now the tank busters with their Overwatch ability, as soon as the Rhino has done its fire on the move, then the tank busters can use their Overwatch. So they fire, and even with a penalty, they manage to roll a 5, which is a hit on the Rhino. That's followed up by a roll of a 4, which means then that the Rhino takes the 3-5 counter for damage, immediately takes 2 suppression tokens, and can do no more movement in that turn. Final activation for the Ultramarines. Fourth activation is the tactical unit that's inside the Rhino. So the tactical unit decides to stay in the Rhino but chooses to fire across at the tank busters, trying to eliminate them. Rolls a 4, which is enough to remove the tank busters from the game, clearing the way a little bit for the vehicle to come through this passage here. But with it crippled, how easy is it going to be for the Ultramarines to come across and get towards these objectives that are looking very distant at the moment? So this is how it looks at the end of the activation phase for turn 2. Let's move into the supply phase. Now at the end of the supply phase for turn 2, and the Orks moved first. So one of the Orks has moved into this crater here, another one's moved over into that crater. The boss has come across over to here to guard the objectives a little bit. The slugger that was here has just taken a single move into that square. Next it was the turn of the Ultramarines. So the bike that was here has whizzed round to this location, perhaps ready to come across that way. The scout that was here has moved up to there. And that's the end of the supply phase. So things not looking so good for the Ultramarines at the moment. With their Rhinos slightly crippled, their ability to get across to these objectives has definitely been reduced. And some of these scouts are being picked off by the Orks. We'll see what the Ultramarines can do in turn 3. Start of the orders phase for turn 3. Ultramarines have the initiative. Ultramarines have played Tactician card, which gives them an additional order for this turn. So the Ultramarines now have 5 orders. 1 goes to Sergeant Elias, 1 to the tactical unit, 1 to Sergeant Vorolanus, another to the attack bike, and the final order to the Rhino. Next, the Orks place their 3 order tokens out. 1 is on this slugger unit, 1 on the rocket launcher, and 1 on this slugger unit here. The Orks then finished by playing Communication Scrambled, which means they get to remove an order token from the Ultramarines. And the Orks chose to remove this order token from the Rhino. First activation in turn 3 for the Ultramarines. So Sergeant Vorolanus was inside the Rhino. He's no longer there. He has moved out of the Rhino. So he declared a charge on the rocket launcher unit here, and to get there, played the card ready for its +1 movement. However, the Orks countered that with their no card. So it meant that Sergeant Vorolanus only had his normal movement of 4 and was unable to reach the rocket launcher to engage it in assault. So instead, he still did his fire on the move action and rolled a 6, which means that the rocket launcher is damaged. Next, it's the activation for the Orks. So the first activation is the rocket launcher. Rocket launcher fires across at the Rhino. Rolling a 5 is enough to hit that Rhino. Ultramarines, however, play second chance and force the Orks to re-roll the dice. On a re-roll, Orks get a 3, which means they still hit the Rhino. The Orks then rolled to determine where the Rhino gets hit and roll a 3. So that's a second hit in the same location, which means that the Rhino has been destroyed and the Ultramarines will have to clamber out. Now this is what it looks like when the Ultramarines have emerged. Tactical unit here, another tactical unit with its order token here, and the plasma gun here. All three of them have suppression markers. Second activation, Sergeant Elias here at the bottom end of the board. He fires at the Ork unit here, rolls a 3, which means the Ork unit is damaged. Second activation for the Orks. The Slugger unit comes running across at the tactical squad, engages them in assault, seeing that they are slightly dazed from just being come out of a damaged vehicle. Also decides to play fall back for the +1 in assault bonus. Then they roll off, and this was the result. So that 6 plus the fallback means that that Ork unit wins the assault. Now this tactical squad should retreat back to one of these 3 squares, but they're all occupied. And so this tactical unit has nowhere to go and is removed from the game, including his order token. And the Sluggers unit moves into position there. Third activation for the Ultramarines. The bike that was here has come up and is now firing on the move against this rocket launcher. Needed a pretty good throw, got a 4. So that means that's a hit, which removes the rocket launcher. The bike then continues its movement along into that square. Now the third activation for the Orks, and it's the turn of the Ork that was here to come across and assault Sergeant Elias. So due to him being in a crater, he gets a little bit of a bonus to his assault strength. So the Orks play second chance, but for the +1 bonus in assault. That means it's even score at the moment in assault, so it comes down to the dice. And they both rolled exactly the same dice roll, which means it's a draw, and they both return to the squares they came from. And this is how the battle grid looks at the end of the activation phase for turn 3. The end of the supply phase, and it was the Ultramarines that got to move first. So the scout that was here, moved up into this position. The scout that was here by the Rhino has come across to here. The 2 units that are kind of pinned behind the Rhino, because of the suppression markers, only have a single movement, and so they are staying put. Next, the Orks moved. So some of the Orks that were here have pulled round. There was an Ork here that's come back into this position. So the Orks just consolidating their position and continuing to put pressure on the Ultramarines. The Ultramarines now, though, have at least broken through this line here, but they still have to get through this fortification to get all the way back to these objectives. And we're about to move into turn 4. Start of turn 4, and we've moved into the orders phase. The Orks played Tactician to gain an extra order. The Orks place their orders first. They're given an order to this Sluggers unit, an order to this Sluggers unit, and these Sluggers over here. Next, the Ultramarines. 1 order to the plasma gun, 1 to Sergeant Vorolanus, 1 to the attack bike, and 1 to Sergeant Elias down here. First activation for the Orks is to move the unit that was here into assault with the scout unit. So this unit of Orks is going to support, so it becomes activated. and that will lend a +1 to the assault. The scouts use a couple of camo cloaks to try and hide a little bit, so that gives them an extra +2 bonus. So roll the dice. Ultramarines did a very impressive throw, but it was matched by the Orks, and so nothing happens. The Sluggers unit returns back to its position. First activation for the Ultramarines, the bike that was here drove through, up and turned round and is up here now. On the way past, it did fire on the move against this Ork unit. Rolled a 5, which is enough to damage that group of Sluggers. Second activation for the Orks. The Ork that was here has come across and into assault with Sergeant Vorlanus. So adding it up, they're even in assault, so it just comes down to the dice throw. Again, the Ultramarines throwing very well, Orks not so well, so that's a victory for Sergeant Vorlanus, which means that the Ork unit flips over and stays in that location. Next to activate is Sergeant Vorlanus, firing on the move as he goes through these craters at the Ork that was here, easily eliminating him. And having declared a charge on this unit, expecting to eliminate the Orks, he engages this unit in close assault, also gaining support from the scouts that are here. And that's just enough with the support from the scouts to take out these Sluggers, push them back, and take that position. Third activation for the Orks. The Sluggers unit that was here moves along and into close assault with Sergeant Elias. Had to play repairs, but for the +1 movement in order to be able to get into assault. Adds extra support from the Sluggers unit that's here. So just slightly ahead in the assault before the dice are thrown. And then the Ultramarines throw an excellent throw again. And that means that the Slugger unit is defeated in assault, pushed back to its original square. Next it's Sergeant Elias's turn to fight back, activation 3. So he decides to stay where he is, but fire at this Ork unit here. Rolls a 3, which means that Ork unit is eliminated. So it's the fourth activation of the Ultramarines to finish off this turn. So the plasma unit that was here came across, firing on the move, doing suppressing fire, and easily putting a suppression marker on that Ork unit. Then engaging it in assault. It's evens before you count the suppression marker. The dice roll looks like that. It's a draw in terms of the dice, but the suppression marker means that that unit is eliminated. Here we are at the end of the supply phase for turn 4. The Orks have moved the unit that was here round to here, and the boss that was there has come back into this building, and now that objective is claimed by the Orks. For the Ultramarines, the tactical squad that was here has come across to here, and the scouts that were there have gone into and out of the zone of control of these 2 units to take up position there. So this is the way things look at the end of the supply phase for turn 4. And it's looking desperate now for the Ultramarines. With the Orks on this objective and no board control really over this side to get to this objective, these 2 objectives are the only realistic objectives for the Ultramarines. What can they do to get there? Running out of manpower, running out of time, and it's quite a long distance to get there. Let's see what happens as we go into turns 5 and 6. So now into turn 5, Ultramarines have the initiative. They place their order tokens first. One on the plasma gun, one on Sergeant Vorlanus, one on the scout, and one on the bike. Next, the Orks. Ork player played Blessed by Gork or Mork. So that means that they can bring back to life one unit that is damaged. So they chose to do that with the Sluggers. Next, they played Communication Scramble to remove an order token from the Ultramarines. So to take that order token away. So that means then that the Orks place their order tokens on this Slugger unit, this Slugger unit that's now back to full health, and this Slugger unit. First activation for the Ultramarines is the plasma gun. Moves across here and into this position. Does suppressing fire on the move at this Ork unit. So in order to make the 4 movement that he needed, played that for the extra +1 movement. So that got him into position, did firing on the move against that Ork unit. Now with the bonuses that he's got for suppressing fire, rolled a 1, but it was just enough to be able to put 1 suppression marker on that Ork unit. First activation for the Orks is this suppressed Ork here. Thinks about putting suppressing fire into Vorlanus, but it's very difficult to achieve, deciding instead to just go for the assault. Ultramarines play full back, but for the +1 bonus in assault, which makes it currently even in assault, ignoring the suppression marker. Dice are thrown, and it's a clear victory for the Ultramarines, which means that this unit is flipped. Ultramarines have lost their second order, so it's straight into the Orks' second order. This unit comes charging into these scouts. Scouts use their final camo cloak token to give a little bit of extra cover. So it's even in the assault. This is the dice roll. Ultramarines still rolling very high at the moment, which means that that Slugger unit is defeated and pushed back to the position it assaulted from. Third activation for the Ultramarines, the bike that was here, comes through the barricades down into this position here. But he's unable to put any shots into this boss, just too much cover. Next, the Ork unit that was here moves up to sit also on the objective with the boss. Can't fire on the move, so just sat there in the corner of the building. Finally, the fourth activation for the Ultramarines, the scout unit that was here moved up into the building, making use of the +1 bonus on this card to move an extra movement. So that objective is now controlled by the Ultramarines. They have one of their 2 objectives. At the end of the supply phase, the Ultramarines move their units first. So the tactical squad has moved up to here. Sergeant Vorlanus able to come past this Slugger unit that has a suppression token. It has no zone of control, so able to just run straight past to here. Likewise, the scouts were able to run past into this position as well. Then Sergeant Elias came into this location. Then the Orks moved. This Ork pulled back, and this Ork just moved forward, perhaps to get some shots in on that bike. So at the moment, it's 1 objective to the Orks, 1 objective to the Ultramarines, and 1 objective here that nobody's going to reach. So the Ultramarines have to achieve 2 objectives before the end of turn 6. They now have 1 turn to achieve it. Can they do it? Let's find out in turn 6. Now into the final turn, the Orks have the initiative. So the Orks place their order tokens out first. 1 on the boss, 1 on the sluggers, and 1 on this slugger unit here. Next, the Ultramarines place their order tokens, one on the bike, one on Sergeant Vorlanus, one on the scout, and one on the plasma gunner. They also play Communication Scrambled to take off an order token from the Orks, and they remove the order token from the boss. First activation, and the Orks would be going first, but they've lost their first activation token, and so it's the Ultramarines to start with Sergeant Vorlanus. He starts off by declaring a charge on the boss, but also putting down some covering fire, firing on the move against the slugger unit. So he fires on the move, and he got a 2, which is enough to put a suppression marker on that slugger unit. Next, he's going to attempt an assault on the boss. If he's successful, that could win the Ultramarines the game. Next, Sergeant Vorlanus comes round into the building and assaults in this direction against the boss. He plays that card for the +1, and the Orks counter with that for the +1. So the Ork boss has a slight advantage over Vorlanus. Let's see what the dice show. If the Ultramarines can win this, it'll push the boss out of the ruins and off the objective. So this is the dice roll. Since it's a draw in the dice, then that's a victory for the Orks, which means Sergeant Vorlanus is pushed back. Next it's the turn of this Sluggers unit, second activation for the Orks, trying to put suppressing fire on the scout unit. So playing Swarm for its +1 firing bonus, but unfortunately rolled a 1, which means that the scout unit is not suppressed. Second activation for the Ultramarines, and it's the attack bike firing down at the boss. The attack bike can't do suppressing fire, so he just has to take a shot at the boss, but rolls well with a 5, which damages the boss. But that objective is still contested. Next it's the turn of this Sluggers unit, third activation for the Orks. Decides to charge Sergeant Vorlanus to kill him. Due to the suppression marker, he's going to be slightly weaker than Sergeant Vorlanus. This is how the dice came out. So it's a victory for Sergeant Vorlanus, and that Sluggers unit is damaged. Third activation for the Ultramarines. The scout unit that was here runs along in a desperate attempt to try and eliminate the boss. Charges in, has a slight disadvantage in the assault, and this is how the dice turned out. So in assault, it's actually a draw, which means that the boss remains hanging on to that objective, and there's no way that Ultramarine there can make any difference to this objective. And so that is the way the battle ends. It is a victory for the Orks. So the Orks may have been retreating, but here they stood their ground and fought valiantly against the Ultramarines, eliminating the Rhino early on and slowing their progress across the battle grid, stopped the Ultramarines from reaching their objectives. And for the Ultramarines, it was too little, too late, just not fast enough to get across to these objectives. Hardly any Orks left. They had the manpower, but they didn't quite do it in time. In the next battle, the Ultramarines will continue their search for the Ork war boss. Join me next time, and thank you for watching.